Good day and welcome to another edition of the Masuk Report. As we do every edition, we will have our panelists share their thoughts about a topic of controversy and national concern. For today, we will have four guests who will share points of view about the consequences of the decreasing number of daily and weekly local newspapers published. Our panelists are Senior Catherine Simonik to my right, to my far right, Senior Gretchen Bonoski, to my left, Junior Josh Wittenberg, and my far left, faculty member Mr. Jeffrey Seymour. Thank you all for being with us today. Since 2014, print news publications have declined by 30%, and circulation has dropped by 25%. Let me ask each of you to comment on why this has happened and continues to happen to such an extent that even major metropolitan papers such as the Boston Globe, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Miami Herald are confronting closure or reducing the number of issues printed. So, Josh, let me ask you to start off and express your points of view.
Well, it all begins with money, because money is the biggest issue, and when news publications don't make enough, usually with not having as many people buy their paper, they're not going to make the money they need to continue printing it.
So the value of a free press, at least in a traditional format, is dissipating? It's just not there anymore? What do you think, Gretchen?
Yeah, I would have to agree with that because of online platforms nowadays. A lot of newspapers can be found online for free, so that will definitely decrease the number of papers that are printed and circulated and sold. So that would definitely decrease a profit.
Well, now, Catherine, you're in with our journalism class producing the Masuk Free Press. What's your position on this?
Well, it is exactly about the money because, like Gretchen said, there are free newspapers you can just view online, and while publishers are trying to keep up by moving online and having paid subscriptions, they just can't keep up because people aren't buying those subscriptions since they can access the information for free online anyway. And it's just a matter of not only money, but of course technology and moving everything to a digital platform that's really declining in the number of employees that, say, bigger corporations like Boston Globe have, because I was actually in the Boston Globe over the summer, and I could just see, as I passed on the road, the old Boston Globe building just abandoned. And then I go to the new site where the Boston Globe is, and it's one floor. And they explained to us how they got rid of a bunch of editors because they don't need many editors anymore because of the use of technology and editing online.
Well, if we take all this into consideration, Mr. Seymour, you actually are the instructor for our journalism class. I mean, where lies the value?
Well, there's obviously value in reporting the news. I mean, there's social value. There's it's a civic value to read about the news. But the thing that works against it is our great capitalist system, which allows companies that make money to survive and companies that don't make money to fall by the wayside. And I think most of what's going on is being driven by market forces. People, if you could get something for free, why would you pay for it? And the other factor is I just don't think people have the same sort of stick-to-itiveness or their same desire to read, long-form newspaper articles anymore. Online, people like to read, quick blurbs, quick paragraphs, and move on. And long-form journalism, like you see in something like the Boston Globe or the New York Times, is very challenging for some people. They look at it and say, well, I don't want to read all that. So people have shorter attention spans, and again, if it's for free, I'll look at it. And since it is for free, why should I pay for it?
So now, if I'm in a position where I'm an editor for, say, Atlantic Magazine, if I look ahead to the future, am I going to face the same thing that newspapers are presently facing?
Yes. And that's why they're scrambling to find solutions online. If you look at something like Atlantic, they'll tell you that most of the people read Atlantic online. And a lot of Atlantic is available for free. But how long can you sustain that model? At some point, you're going to have to charge people. And I know that people who started to charge, transition from free to charging, I think there's some real difficulties with that. Some of the major newspapers who formerly had free websites are transitioning to pay websites, and they're finding that people aren't moving to the pay website, and that's dangerous.
Well, now, let's consider studies done by the University of North Carolina, Pew Research Center, and Notre Dame University. They show that local papers provide a balance to check local and state government. The data also shows that the absence of local dailies and weeklies has an economic effect on government bonding and interest rates paid on long-term borrowing. That leads me to ask, is there a benefit to compromising news resources to combat things such as Craigslist? What do you young people think about this? I'm in a position where I'm 71 years old now, and newspapers have been a part of my life. Publications like Atlantic have been a part of my life, and it's hard for me to envision their absence. But that doesn't mean, that could just mean I'm falling out of touch. I'm not sure. Do you have any thought on that, Catherine?
Well, I always describe this to people as a transition period, sort of, in a way where we have a generation that still wants the physical newspapers and magazines in their hands, but then we have an upbringing generation that are all completely digital, and that's it. And then you have some people in between. And that's where, right now, currently, in 2018, I can't imagine the complete absence of physical newspapers. However, I do believe in the future we might get to that point, the complete transition of everything being online. However, how will it continue? How will they face the problem of not being able to fund these things with free websites? I don't know. But do I believe everything might go digital? Yeah, I do.
What are your thoughts, Gretchen? I mean, do you see this as a positive for the future?
Well, as Katie said, it's a period of transition where we have that generation who wants printed copies, and we have the new generation that wants entirely digital media. But I see this could be a negative in the aspect of local civic engagement in town elections, because already the voter turnout, even in the town of Monroe, is so low for our local elections, and that was with having papers such as the Monroe Courier. And now that that's gone, the citizens of Monroe are going to know less and less about local politics, so they might be less informed about voting, and therefore will be less likely to vote, so it could be an issue.
Josh, what are your thoughts, particularly when you consider, and you've also been an athlete as well as a scholar, correct?
Yes.
And you have dealt with situations where playing baseball or basketball, there have been local coverages.
Mm-hmm.
It appears to me that that's just going to be gone.
Yes. I know there's one organization that's actually stepped up and taken part, it's called Game Time Connecticut, and they have come out in recent years, and they produce a magazine and online versions, and they have like a SoundCloud podcast. And they're new, and that's how they kept up with the times. Because I know there's many high school kids that listen to SoundCloud and they want to hear what's going on in Connecticut sports, and so that's what they do to make sure they keep the viewers.
Mr. Seymour, do you think there's any mechanism by which parents are going to respond and say, wait, when my daughter gets this award, and in the past the Courier put a picture in there, is there a place for local newspapers to be online newspapers?
There will be a lot of disappointed parents who are looking forward to clipping out that picture of little Timmy getting his sports award and putting it on the refrigerator, and that just isn't going to happen. And the other side of that is, I was at the board meeting the other night, Monday night, and it was the first budget presentation. And in the past, there had always been somebody from the Courier or somebody else, at least there to take some notes and to do a little statement about what the budget looks like. But there was nobody there on Monday night, and I don't expect there'll be anybody there at the budget workshops going forward. That used to be a way that people would keep informed about what was happening in town with the budget, and if they reported X, that would sometimes drive more people to come to the meeting. But there was nobody there to report, and that, I think, is one of the real downsides of losing a local paper is there is a lack of information. There is no place you can turn to get insight as to what's going on. I mean, you could look at the website, look at the PowerPoint presentation, But sometimes you need a reporter there to report on what was said, what questions were said, where did it look like the board was going. You don't get that anymore if nobody shows up to report.
One of the things I'm kind of leery about is all of a sudden these adult and parents, taxpayers, et cetera, go into what I would call, but the nobody told me syndrome. And do we run into a risk? Are we going to be in that position where, nobody told me? So how am I supposed, why? Why didn't anybody tell us? How are we going to deal with that? I mean, the Connecticut Post is not going to give a lot of coverage to Monroe events. And 5 local papers went under this summer. So, I mean, what is the stand? What do you see as the benefit of taking journalism and putting out the Masuk Free Press?
Well, do you mean putting out our,
Paper.
in general, putting out the paper? I mean, I feel like you can't avoid the whole problem of who told me, like, no one told me. You can't avoid that right now. There's going to be that conflict, which 10 years down the road probably won't matter anymore because things are going to have changed as far as how we get our news. I think one thing Josh mentioned was the podcasts. That's something I noticed while going up to the Boston Globe. They started a podcast room. They have a whole new room for that because that's part of what our generation likes to listen to. That's popular. So that's a way that they're coping with trying to keep up with the times, as Josh said. So I think that as far as the Monroe Courier goes, I don't think there's a very viable way to keep it going print-wise to get the coverage that we used to get, besides somehow figuring out how to go online, because I think it's the only platform that we can actually access right now. It might have to be for free, but you're getting the news out there. Something like a podcast could be a solution too, a Monroe podcast.
Gretchen, is that something you're in agreement with? Do you think in your adult future it won't matter to you if you have a local news media?
Yeah, like Katie had said, it would depend on whether the news was being presented in another way. Because if it's not being presented at all, then there's an issue of communication there between local issues and the people that it may affect. But at the same time, there is going to be that transition to non-printed media.
Well, Josh, what do you think then? Are we just going to have nothing but podcasts in the future? Or athletes like yourself just going to have to wait for accelerating at the college level before you get any media coverage? Or how is it going to work?
I feel like it's going to more shift to social media and Facebook, because I know that there's Facebooks that I'm pretty sure there's local news on Facebook. Like parents post things. Even news organizations can post things on Facebook. I feel like it will more go to that to adapt to parents, because a lot of parents are on Facebook and would read that.
But Mr. Seymour, you're nodding your head. Is that going to mean possibly in the future they're going to have this notion on the part of the public at large that all I need to know is what's on Facebook, but what about what doesn't get on Facebook or what shouldn't be on Facebook?
I think the bigger problem with getting your news from postings at Facebook is that journalists have a certain standard. Journalists know what to look for. Journalists know what questions to ask. Journalists have a duty to find the truth among all the static. And a lot of people who post what they think is news may not be posting news. And so the line between news, opinion, rumor, and fantasy is going to get blurred, and we could get to the point where nobody knows what the truth is. I know that people in this community post stuff as facts that aren't facts, and they get disseminated as facts, and that's then you run into problems because people take as a fact something that isn't a fact. I mean, in journalism, one of the reasons people take journalism, one of the reasons that people like Catherine are going to get involved in journalism is you're going to learn the techniques to create an unbiased, honest report on something. And that's hard to do, and it takes work. Posting something you heard is easy. The journalism part is hard, but we still need to have the journalists to help us sort through all the static. And I think that's going to be lost on something like Facebook.
That kind of scares me because I think that weakens a sense of community on the part of the public. And I'm concerned about that because we're seeing what you just referred to from the national level on down. And I'm very leery. I think about my children, my grandchildren. You know, is there going to be more naivety, more arrogance, more ignorance? I mean, I don't know what's going to be. And is it just going to be a situation where people say, well, I don't need it, I don't care? And are we going to get more apathy? Do you think that's going to happen, Gretchen? We'll become more apathetic?
You know, I don't really know. I guess that's possible because, as Mr. Seymour had said, it could. It's not necessarily like the new type of journalists we see online sorting through to find the truth behind issues. It might just be people self-reporting about their own experiences, which isn't necessarily an unbiased article. So that could lead to that, yes.
As a journalist, what do you think?
I think the way that media is put out now with our ever-changing groups of generations, we're very apathetic right now because of the way it's being presented to us. When I say us, I mean the younger generations. We're very apathetic because of the way it's presented, but I think news isn't going to go away. I don't believe news will ever go away. I think that there's going to be this transition period, but a disruption period between how we can figure out how to accurately and professionally get this news out in a new type of way to where the younger generations won't be apathetic to it.
Are you optimistic, Josh?
Not entirely. I just think it will shift towards the. I feel like TV organizations are going to boom, like News 8, Channel 12 News, stuff like that is going to boom because the newspapers are going to die out, and then people won't have a sense of news, and they're going to feel naive to what's going on in the community, so they're going to shift towards TV news channels.
So we'll see more local television news and rely more and more upon what might be called sound bites.
Sure, yes.
Because-
disagree.
Yeah, actually, so do I.
Okay?
I disagree with the shift to
TV.
to TV. I think TV is next after print media to go because less and less people have time to sit down and watch the news at certain times of day. And I think like with people's growing like busy schedules, I think it's really gonna, after print media going, TV programs are next, and then everything's gonna be shifted entirely to quick online articles.
Yes, I've seen so many videos and talk of like millennials even. They're buying new houses, they're getting homes, and they aren't buying a TV to add to their furniture, their furnishings. They aren't buying a TV anymore.
So it'll go the way of land phones, landlines.
Yeah.
Yes, unfortunately, but yes.
Yeah.
Well, for my own bias, I like the comment you made, unfortunately. I think there is some unfortunateness to all of this, and we have to be somewhat leery about where we're headed.
Well, here's the thing, people are afraid of change, but you gotta keep calm because me being an optimistic, or an optimist, is that, like I said, news isn't going away. It's just the way that we portray it that's changing, but that's the thing that people don't like, and they think it's the end of the world and that it's ending, but it's not ending, it's just changing, and that takes time.
But will the quality suffer?
For the,
Yeah,
like I said,
I mean-
the transition period and the disruption period, yes.
Yeah, and are we going to be in a position where that, in your case, the TV personality
Yeah.
takes the place of the TV journalist?
I don't know. I feel like when you hear it more from a person rather than reading it, you feel it, you can gain an opinion better.
And
Okay.
that's why podcasts, I think, will prevail.
That's what I was thinking. Like when you hear a voice tell you information, I feel like you can draw your own opinion from it better than you can from reading something. Because when you read something, people unknowingly put their bias into it. Whereas if you have a script usually people follow, then they don't really put their bias into it.
Mr. Seymour, you're kind of gently nodding.
No, I mean, I've been thinking about podcasts. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but the podcasts that I do listen to impress me because if somebody really knows what they're doing when they do a podcast, and has time to put together a good podcast, they can be very informative, very unbiased, and leave you with a lot of thinking. Like I'm thinking of the stuff I hear on NPR where they give the reporters the time necessary to spool out, thoughtful, provocative podcasts. And when you give people time to do that, and journalists have the time to do that, it's a great source of news. Me sitting at home podcasting about what I see on Quincy Street marching, late at night and how dangerous it is in my neighborhood, that's not news. That's just me that's the rantings of a difficult old man. But when done properly, by people who know what they're doing, a podcast can have great value, and they can be engaging, and sometimes in ways that regular broadcast TV can't be. I mean, listen, regular broadcast TV news is doomed. Just look at the advertising. The advertising is all designed for old people like me they're selling us drugs that we don't need to keep us alive for another 20 years so we can sit at the home and eat our lime green Jell-O. I mean, they don't even sell cars on the evening news anymore. If you're not even selling cars on the evening news, you've already determined that the people watching the evening news are like me and Mr. Bodner, right? But that's a clear indication that the market is going. And you're going to have to look at other media, and it's a difficult transition. I don't like change. I still like the newspaper, but we'll adapt. You'll adapt. But journalism will always be there. I know that because I know young journalists. I know somebody who works for Reuters, and she puts out daily copy, but then she goes down to the lab and does a podcast. They merge these things together, and there are new possibilities. It'll always be there. Just be in a different form.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, let's look at this question, okay? If I may present it in a rather brazen fashion, all right? How do we know what to trust in the future? And secondly, going back to the localization of the news, how are we going to contend with the fact that when little Gretchen is playing in the SWC championship, which is a big deal in that household? Nothing.
Right.
What do you think?
I don't know. I can't say that I'm not disappointed as an athlete, and I'm sure Josh can relate to this. But I play softball, he plays baseball. That when reporters show up at our games, we're like, oh, this is pretty cool, right? We're excited. And that's not going to be a thing anymore. Maybe as we get to a state championship, it could be with the Connecticut Post coming around. But to any local games or a local Newtown Masuk rivalry, they won't be there. So that's pretty disappointing. So I don't
Now,
know.
let me jump one more point out of here. Thank you for thinking about that. But my other question here is going back to something I referred to in an earlier statement, and that is the local newspapers have a check and balance effect, even at the state and local political level. Okay, and if that's absent, what consequence may follow? And it even shows that when you look at local newspapers, that's been one of the things that bonding institutions have considered, and the state considers when it figures out, all right, what interest rate should we charge the town of Monroe when it wants to issue municipal bonds so it can renovate one of its schools? Because that's how it happens. I mean, I think they spent, $38 million in the last renovation? Monroe didn't have $38 million sitting there. It had to issue bonds. It had people who want to invest and buy those bonds, they want to know what's the stability of that society? What is the culture of that particular community? So I don't know. Mr. Seymour, any thought on that?
That will be missing. I mean, and especially at the local level, I think, the press does serve as a check on the power of all the commissions and committees that are out there. And in the absence of regular reporting on your town, and you're only going to get one version. You're going to look at the agenda, you're going to look at the minutes, you're going to look at what they voted on and say, oh, I guess this is happening. But if a reporter's there, they can talk about what issues were raised. Now, what they're going to say is, well, we televise all our hearings now. Who has the time to sit and watch a hearing? right? I mean, maybe if you're interested, you'd be there. As I said, the budget, Monday was the first presentation of the budget. There was no reporters and only one private citizen who took notes. That's it. So where are people going to learn about what's going on with the budget this year? The Courier used to always send somebody and say, here's what it looks like, here's where we're going. But it's not there anymore.
So Josh, what about for your future, when you project ahead and you see yourself as a homeowner in your own adulthood? And I realize that's asking you to really be imaginative and stretch a little bit. But what do you think about all this? I mean, if you were shopping for a home, would you be looking and want to see something like a Monroe Courier to get a sense of this town before you lay down $20,000 as a down payment?
It would help, yes. It would, yeah. It would definitely help to see what was going on in the town and what the culture of the town was like. But I guess you'd have to figure that out for yourselves and do a little bit more research otherwise if it wasn't there.
So there is some disadvantage there.
Yes.
What about you two people? Any thought on that?
Same thought.
Same thought,
Yeah.
you agree? So we can't stop the direction we're headed in. It seems like we have an agreement on that. So can we alter the angle of direction so it does become more positive in the future, and Josh in the future is not stuck in this dilemma like, well, how do I get a sense of what this community is like? So that may be in your hands, not in our hands. So on that note, we'll close our program. I offer our thanks to Catherine, Gretchen, Josh, and Mr. Seymour. And thanks to our viewers. We at the Masuk Report hope you will join us for our next show. Be well and be safe.